Hi, and welcome to the Doctorate in Community College Leadership Program's Legendary Leadership Series. I'm Wendy Guth. I'm the Dean of Health Careers at Illinois Central College, and we're talking today with Dr. Laura Meeks, who is recently retired president of Eastern Gateway Community College in Steubenville, Ohio. Dr. Meeks has accumulated a lifetime of leadership experience in community colleges since 1988. When she became Vice President of Instruction at Green River Community College in Auburn, Washington, and then becoming President of Fort Scott Community College in Fort Scott, Kansas. We will be exploring the frequently asked question, what does it take to be an effective community college leader? And we've asked Dr. Meeks to share her perspectives and the skills and personal qualities necessary to be successful as a community college leader. First, Dr. Meeks, tell us a little bit about your community college experience.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I'd probably like to start by where I think everything starts, and that's with teachers. I was a teacher, a high school English teacher and debate coach for 9 years. And then I was sort of like, I would say, recruited into becoming a community college leader by someone asked me if I'd be interested in becoming a dean. And I applied for the job, and I was a dean at Fort Scott Community College for 4 years. And then I had an opportunity to, my husband and he kind of encouraged me to apply for a different job. And I was a vice president of instruction for 3 years at Green River Community College in Seattle. Then I had been at Fort Scott Community College as a dean, and I was invited back to apply for the presidency. And I did receive, the board's support and faculty and staff support, so I was a dean there, a president rather, for 8 years. And then I had an opportunity to change positions, and I've been at Eastern Gateway Community College in Steubenville, Ohio now as president for 16 years, but just this year I am now president emeritus because I retired. So I've been a president for 25 years. And it's funny, when I first started going to community colleges when I was about 31 to the AACC, I tried to go every year. I saw Judith Eaton walk across the stage and become one of the first, I think she was the first female who ever was a president of AACC. And I just thought, oh my gosh, look at that. And so 25 years later, I got my pin for being a president for 25 years. It was kind of a goal.
What an accomplishment.
Yeah, well, 25 years, that was pretty good.
That
so
is.
Anyway, I'm very, that's something I take, I wouldn't say pride, but I'm so grateful that I was able to do that, to be a leader.
That's awesome. A leader for 25
Yeah,
years.
as a president.
What would you say to respond to the question, can I be a community college leader?
Well, the answer to that, I think I'd ask the person some questions. Let's say it would be you, okay, that you'd ask that question. The first question I would say is, why do you want to be a president or a leader in a community college? And to me, one of the best answers is because I have success in being able to carry out projects, and I love to teach, I love students, I love to see them grow, but I'd like to increase my circle of influence to make life better for my students and to make life better for the citizens of my community. Because I think if I could be a dean or a director or a president, I'd be able to increase my circle of influence. So my first question would be, why do you want to be a president? The second one would probably be, do you think people would want you to be a president? And the answer to that is, you can't be a leader unless people are willing to follow you. So are people willing to follow you now? And if they are, let's say all throughout your life, people have just kind of wanted you to do it because you're good at accomplishing a task and people want to be a part of a success. Or maybe they think your personality is one of love and they just want to feel good, so they want to help you, Whatever it is, to be a leader, you have to be the kind of person that people want to follow. Mm-hmm. And another question would be, do you like to develop people? Like for teachers, I like that light bulb, when the light bulb goes off, or, I know your field is medicine, when you're successful in helping a patient heal. Those are all good reasons to become a leader, or I won't just talk about president, because many people, want any kind of leadership in a community college is a good role, I think, because we're all helping. But if you like to develop people, then that's a good reason to consider community college leadership. And the last one is, do you like to persuade people. You know, one time I met a president and she decided she was going to quit. Well, she actually kind of was asked to quit. And she said, I am never going to work at a college again that has a union because I don't like working with unions. And I thought, you shouldn't work at a college then because, you know, you never get to have your way always. When, as a president or a leader, you have to be persuasive. You have to convince people that the way you're going is right. So, or best for the students and best for the college. So when you meet resistance, do you like to persuade? So the answer to that question would be those 4 questions. Why do you want to do it? Do you like to, do people want to follow you? Do you like developing others? And do you like to persuade? So, but I have one other thing I want to say about that, and that's that many people don't ask if they can be a leader. I never did. I was a reluctant leader. Someone asked me. And so sometimes, you know, you have this little flicker of leadership in you and you don't even know you have it, and it takes someone to say, did you ever consider being a community college president or a community college dean? And that flicker then starts the thought, well, maybe I will ask that question. How do you do it? And I think everyone in your class has asked that question. I think you have the right answer by enrolling in this program at Ferris University because all of you you've asked yourself the question, do I want to be the leader? Or maybe someone has asked you, why don't you be a leader? Like I've asked you. You should be a leader. You know? So you should be a president. But it's for you to decide if you want to do that. But a lot of times I would call them reluctant leaders. Then one last point I want to make. When I was at Green River Community College, I met several faculty who were very, very, well, everywhere you meet faculty who are brilliant. They're very smart. But they said things like, we shouldn't do that, we should do this, or I could do this. And I read this book called The Plateauing Trap, and I told the president about it because I was a VP then. They could, they should. So if you're the kind of person that sits back and you're not the leader, but you're saying, I could do that, or I know I could do better than that person, do it, do it. Just don't be plateaued. That's the answer to that question.
So that's why you're an inspiring leader.
Oh, thanks.
So let's say the person has that innate feeling and wants to pursue leadership. What would you say are necessary skills for the person to possess or develop to become a successful leader?
In a community college? Mm-hmm. I personally believe that you need to have community college experience and experience in education. That's my belief. I know that many leaders don't have that experience when they go into community college, but I'm being interviewed, so I can give you the answer I would give. But I think that having a real appreciation for community colleges and our mission to make the lives better for people that we touch is the best reason, is the best. I would call it a skill. It's a belief that you have. Getting a doctorate degree is also. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have a doctorate degree. My very first job I had as dean was just after I got my doctorate degree, and at that point, being a female, you really needed the paper. It's probably true today as it was then, but I was the only dean in Kansas when I was selected. And there were many people who were very competent, but getting a doctorate degree is the absolute first step. And of course you have to know about human resources, public relations, you need to know about budgeting. Go through your curriculum. It's what you need to know, the skills you need to know. But like before I came, I Googled AACC for the traits of leadership. And I was going to read those, but I found out that you already know them, because they're common, but those are the traits. The article called Community College Leadership in a New Millennium pretty well describes those characteristics. But I remember when I was a dean, I was a brand new dean, I didn't know how to do it. And I always was insecure because I thought so many people knew more than I did about leadership and being an academic dean. I read a book by Margaret Mead's daughter, Catherine Batson. And she talked about the role of being a dean. She was at a four-year university, but as being a shepherd. And I like that analogy. I'm from a rural environment, northern Minnesota, and a shepherd is something I can relate to. And so I always thought, that's really what you are. You take care of faculty, meet their needs by making life easier for them and helping them fulfill their dreams. And for example, if they have a project they're really interested in, you help them get the funding, you provide the ways and the means for them to be able to do a better job of what they're doing. So I like that idea. And then the other big influence in my life on what skills you need and what you need to be a dean or a president came when I went to the Gallup. I talked my president into letting me go there and to learn how to interview faculty. And while I was there, they interviewed me. And I learned a lot about my own strengths through that interview. And now it's cheap. It would cost you $22 to do what I did. And that was 20 years ago. There's a book called Strength Finder, and it's by Tom Rath. And you just go on, you Google, just Google Strength Finder or Gallup, and you'll find it. It's really not a book you read. You just take the assessment in the back, and then you find out, like, what are your 5 top strengths? And this book then describes, like, belief is one of mine. Belief means that you believe that you have the power in your job as a community college leader to change people's lives. And then there are others, like operational skills, and so I could make the whole list for you, but I would just go and say, get the book. It's only $22.50. And when my kids were young, I spent $500 per child to be telephone interviewed through this process, the same type of thing, and I spent $500. So I'm not trying to sell for Gallup because they don't need me, but I really think that, I know that AACC in their leadership program, they have all their students use this, all their people use this instrument that helps you identify many of the strengths that are needed to be a president. And I also know that the military uses it, and we started using it at our college for college freshmen so that they can identify their strengths and know what some of the talents are that you need to be a leader, or, I hope I described that all right.
Yeah, maximizing your individual strengths.
Right.
And the strengths of others.
Right.
So with that being said, my next question is there a mold for, a particular mold for a college community president or leader?
I thought there was. I really did think there would be mold. When I was a first dean, as I told you, I was the only female, and they were all white males in a room, and I thought, I don't belong here. And the president who recruited me and then hired me, he would tell me, you're too kind. And as an administrator, you need to not be as kind. And I knew he was right. Because Wendy, I've always been kind. I'm a nice person. I'm from Minnesota, Minnesota nice, but I am a kind person, and I was convinced that I might not be an administrator, okay? And then when I went to Gallup and they asked to interview me, a year later, or like about 8 months later, they sent me a letter and invited me to come back to Nebraska, and I thought it was to, pay more money to do a second interview. All expenses paid. And this woman from Harlem and I got the award of the year as administrators. Wow. And that's when I knew, and they taught me that it's fine, empathy's great. It's wonderful to have the skills I have, like relationship skills and a sense of humor, as long as you have courage. And I do have courage. I just don't like it when I have to fire somebody, and most people don't. But you can be a leader if you're kind and fun. And there's no mold. I am different, though. I realize all my life I've not been the typical community college president. Let's put it that way. But I want to encourage people to, it takes many different types of leaders, and there are many different types of colleges. And so if you're a sequential person, for example, there's a book called Female Advantage by Sally Helgerson. And in that book, she describes, this was back in the 70s, that management is like, for many women, like a web. It's not hierarchical, it's not authoritative, it's more like you try to connect people. And that's what I do. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point and others. He talks about people who are people connectors. Mm-hmm. I'm more of that type of person. So when I get a job done, I don't start at the end and then say, what do we have to do to get to the beginning? I see it as a circle, and we're going to have to do all these things. I drive other people crazy. But if I can find people who are sequential to work with me, they help map it out. And then as a team, we come together and we really get a lot done. But if it takes all kinds of different leaders to get the job done. So I don't consider someone who's sequential and authoritative better or worse than my style. It's just that I think that people who have the style like I do can be very successful too. Our college just won the award last year, 2015, for CEO and Board of the Year from the American Association of Community Colleges. And so it was sort of like a stamp of approval, not for me, but for people who are like me to say, we can do it, you know? It's a different mold. But I would say this, that when I was at Vice President of Instruction, I was going to leave. The president, who I dearly loved, gave me a book. It's this book called Power of the Presidency. And this book says that what you should do as a president is get on a pedestal and stay there. Because people need to see authority and they'll respond well to authority. And so you maintain a distance and have a presence. Well, I decided that when I read the book, and you can see I took notes all over the place. I mean, how do you be a president? That's kind of what I was studying. I decided I had to put this book aside, and I could not be that kind of president. I had to be myself, because I believe that the most important quality of presidency is integrity and honesty. And I don't think you can fake it. And I could not be this kind of president. So I took a chance, Wendy. It's like I decided to be me. The president I work for said, I worry about you because you're so open. And I am open. And so I don't know if I did the right thing or not as a president, but I decided to be who I am and to use my strengths, and then to help find people that could support me, and it worked for me. So basically, there is no mold. I believe that there is no mold, and one size does not fit all. It absolutely is true. There's one little miracle that happened to me, too. When I did something I would never recommend that any of you do. No one should do what I did. When I was interviewed for the job at Eastern Gateway Community College that I've been honored to hold for 16 years, I was at a Holiday Inn and the board interviewed me. And they asked the question, what's your weakness? And you always are supposed to say, like, I'm a workaholic, or I know what you're supposed to say. But I believe in fit, and I believe that when you're a president or a dean or take a position, you must be totally honest in the interview. Because you don't want to go somewhere where you don't fit, and they don't want someone who doesn't fit. So there's a fit for every mold. So your job is to make sure that you find the right place for you. And that's their job, to see if you fit. Well, they asked me the question, what's your weakness? And I said, my weakness is finance and budgeting. Well, that's a kiss of death. I mean, you don't say that in an interview, but I did. And so the board said, I found out he was a CPA. He said, well, you know what? We have a CFO who's been here for a long time, and he's excellent. And the board has excellent, we just have total respect for him and confidence in him. So our president doesn't need to have that as a strength. And I said, okay, but I asked a follow-up question. I said, can I trust him? Can I trust him? And they said, absolutely. And that's when I knew I'd be okay. So I don't think I would have ever been a good president in a large, multi-campus institution, because I have some weaknesses, and that's one of them. But I fit really well in a small, especially blue-collar place. Dave Ponitz calls me the truck driver president, because my dad was a truck driver, and my mom washed dishes in a nursing home. I know who I am, and I know who I can help. I always get teary. Sorry, I bet you never made me cry during an interview. But I just want you to know that it's okay to cry as a president. I've cried several times because being a president is an act of heart and mind, and I've been blessed. Okay, let's talk about something else.
That's a fabulous story. And again, your example showed how you maximize other people's strengths.
I do, because we need each other.
Yeah. So you shared a lot about characteristics and values. What about building those relationships that you talk about that are so important?
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that? Or how would you give someone advice for building relationships?
I think that a lot of people know if it's authentic or not. I worked for someone who his secretary would have notes made out for people typed, and it would be like for birthdays, and then he'd sign them every day and sent that note. You know, sending a personal note is one way to build a relationship, but I think it goes much deeper than that. I think you really have to be loving and kind, and I think that building relationships, to me, it's everything. Relationships building as a teacher, you know, if those of you who have taught, or anyone in student services, you know how important it is when you help a student. And the research is showing that students do better if they know that someone took care of them. Well, that's how I have found faculty to be, and staff. You really care about them. If they, like, we have faculty that have invited me. Well, I'll give you an example of last week. Okay, when I was in Seattle, it was really a tough place to work because there was administration. It was they and we, you know, and I was in the administration as a vice president of instruction, followed a male who had been there 20 years, so I had to gain respect and everything. But one example, one of the union representatives asked my husband and me to go on a hike. And I had always lived on flat land, you know, being in Kansas for a long time. So Joe and I, we got these big backpacks, you know, and we always said yes. If you're invited, you go. If it's a wedding, if there's a funeral, you go. But getting back to this hiking trip, so I remember Joe and I went, and oh man, it was like a steep climb, and I was huffing and puffing on the first part. And we decided, you know, Steve and his wife are hikers, so we said, how about if we picnic here while you climb up and we'll wave? And we did that. But many years later, how many years has it been? It's like 25 years later, I got a note from Steve, and he said to me, no, I sent him a note, that's right. I sent, how did this work? Well, anyway, I sent him, I guess I said something, he sent a note back to me, and I said, I appreciate the time that you and Ann had taken us. And he wrote a note back to me saying, all these years have passed and you met my wife once and you knew Ann's name. Well, I did somehow remember. I'm not good at names, but I remembered her name. Well, that meant something to him. And he sent a note and he said that he had talked to some other people, and they said that, this one person said that when I was there working with them, with Rich, it was like, to them, it was the Camelot years. Well, why did he say that? It's not, he wasn't complimenting me on my ability to maybe do budgets, but because I really did, I did have relationships, and building those they're so important, and people respond better they respond to you when they know you care. Mm-hmm. So you have to have relationships, first of all, with, I believe, the people you work with. And in that book again by Malcolm Gladwell, he says that it's institutions that are 250 or less are probably the best institutions. I believe that because you really do get to know everyone. You get to know them as people, and you have to individualize, so you have to know individually what their problems are and what their passions are and how you develop them. The thing I learned also is that you need, of course, relationships with students to get to know them, and there are many techniques to get to know students, very natural. Students want to know the president or the dean. And then you also have to know parents. We used to have a football program at one college, and mothers from Florida would call me and say, you know, my son's in football, but I want him to learn too, and I'd say yes. And those calls, by the way, I would call them late at night, you know, after work, 8 o'clock at night or whatever, and those mothers who cared about their son's progress in school so much appreciated when the president would call them. The other thing is you must build relationships in the community, be very active in clubs and organizations, and then have relationships with federal and local level with politicians. But I've saved the best to last, and it's probably one of my weaknesses too. But the relationship with the board as a president is very important. When I used to work for this one president, and he will know, if he ever sees this tape, he'll know it's him. I used to say, I could help you with the faculty because, you know, you have problems with the faculty. He said, I know. I said, here's a list, a communication list you could use. He said, Laura, thank you. But he said, the board likes me. And I learned something about that. When you're the president, your board really needs someone like you, you know? So as a president, you really do want to spend good relationship time with your board, developing support from them. So again, I think that building relationships, to me, Wendy, that's a great question because it's the most important thing for a president to do, I think.
Mm-hmm. Moving a little bit past relationships, now I'm going to change to problems facing the community colleges today. So what do you feel is the biggest challenge facing college presidents?
What's the biggest challenge? Well, first thing, you don't always want to say, I remember when I was a teacher, as a matter of fact, one reason I love becoming an administrator is, as a teacher, I knew we needed a scope and sequence in the school I worked in, and so the superintendent said it was fine for me to do all this. Then I wanted to do more, and he said, well, there's no money. And I really thought, that's really wrong. You shouldn't make decisions based on whether there's money. But as I became an administrator, those words came back to haunt me, because I'd have to say, yeah, where's the money going to come from? I hate those words, but frankly, the challenge for community colleges has always been, and I think even in the future will be more, tight financial resources. But I've learned that no matter how much money you have, you can always somehow make it happen. And so I'm going to answer the question differently. I think the biggest challenge facing community colleges right now, in my opinion, is mission boundary concerns. I have seen over time, those of us in community colleges have done more and more, you can call it dual credit, taking your courses to the high school and having students learn there. And now we're seeing more community colleges becoming universities and taking on the university mission. I know it's probably not right to say this because I don't represent the mainstream of community college leadership, but I think both of those missions could cause some concern for me in the future of what community colleges will become. Because if you could take almost all of your community college education in a high school, why are you going to need a community college in the future? Mm-hmm. And I worry about making sure the qualifications of the faculty are strong in the high schools. I know that I was a high school teacher and I had a master's degree in rhetoric and communication. I could have taught at a community college. So I'm not saying they're not qualified, but I am saying that I think that's a concern, in my opinion, for community colleges, is that many people will be getting their community college experience in a high school, and it could erode the strength of community colleges in the future. The second one, I've never thought that community colleges should offer university courses. I think that we should have models where students can take those courses either online or land-based. But I just don't believe, that's my opinion, but I won't say anything more about that because I'm not trying to get into argument. The second and even the most important change and concern, and when I was first becoming a president, people talked at board meetings about buildings, mainly about buildings and about budget. Now they're talking, and they should be talking about this, success rates of students. And so even though we have less money, we're going to have more services and higher quality for the students we have, and it's all going to be directed at learning. So on the first part of my answer, I was kind of like, well, I don't really know if I agree with the mission of community college. I'm all for this. We should have been talking about student learning all along. And at our college, we were, in the Achieving the Dream model, we were one of the second round, so we were one of the first colleges, or leader college in Achieving the Dream. We learned so much about scorecards and measuring student success. I mean, I had been through Boeing training, because we did Boeing training when I was in Seattle, and I've read The Fifth Discipline by Sengre. I mean, I knew all of these processes need to be measured, but Achieving the Dream really helped our college in getting to know the bottom line, which is are students learning, and how do you measure that? Ohio is 100% funding is on student learning, whether or not they complete a course with a D or better, they use a D or better, whether or not they graduate. So as I know that this will be the future for community colleges, and I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a challenge that we should have been focused on all along. Are our students learning and doing better? So to me, those are the challenges facing us, and those are the ones that the challenge of our students learning is right on point. And I am such a believer in that new model.
Mm-hmm. Evolving to a student-centered organization and focusing on outcomes of student learning.
Right.
Yeah. We've talked about characteristics, values, relationships, challenges. So putting all that together, if I were to survey your most recent community college, what would they tell me is, what would they say about you, your leadership style? What would they tell me?
I wish I could, when I first started being a president, I did, what do you call it, 360 evaluation? I would always, I did that.
Yeah.
I did that always. And I would share it with everyone, the board, everyone. And I can't remember the specifics of that, and you didn't ask that question. You said if you surveyed my most recent 16 years at Eastern Gateway, and I wasn't that good at doing that. I let that get away from me because there's no excuse, but we expanded and like doubled in size, and so I kind of let that go, and I shouldn't have. But I do know what they'd say. I have a pretty good idea. I'm going to start out with the bad. They'd say that I am very good at developing people. I really work hard at helping people develop, and I know I do that. But my weakness is I think I can develop people that don't always have the talent to be developed. And what they would say about me is that I should have fired more people.
Wow.
Yeah. I would, and that's I really work hard to develop people, and some people just don't have, they're not in the right job, or maybe whatever. I think I've said enough. You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
When you talked about fit, they might not have the right fit for that organization, but it sounds like you take pride in the success of others.
Oh yeah, and you have to, I think, to be a good leader. But I I think that's a natural gift, that it makes you happy when someone else does well.
I agree.
I have a whole file of student letters, that when I have a bad day, I get those out and I read about them, and I think about the students that have done well. And the other thing is they'd say, Laura is more involved is so process-centered. I collaborate, asking people advice. We have groups, we have processes, we have shared governance. But they would say she wasn't decisive enough. We needed decision made, and that would be a fair criticism of me. They'd also say that I don't always follow protocol, and it worried the faculty at first. They got used to me later, but I would give out my phone number to freshman orientation students. I'd say, and here's my phone number. And the faculty would go, are you kidding? You're not going to do what? But now, all those years, 16 years, not one student ever called me. But they knew they could. I think it's a nice, sounded like a safety net. Mm-hmm. If a student knows. And I just had a doctor's appointment the other day, and this woman said, aren't you Laura Meeks from the college? You're president? Yeah. I said, yeah. She said, my husband just thought the word really, really admired you. I said, really? Yeah, because I was a student there, and he remembered that you said, you gave the phone number, he thought that was so great. And I'm going, well, that's good, but they would say that students might come to me rather than to them, and for a while that did happen, but then the faculty realized that I wasn't going to fix the student's problem, I was just going to listen. Mm-hmm. And so, but let me do a few good, okay? Yes. They'd say that I give others the credit. I do give others the credit. And they'd say that I did know this. When I retired, one of the lead faculty was chosen to give the speech. And she had this big box that was all wrapped up, and she told everybody was in it. She said, data. Laura loves data. And so, Dr. Meeks, here's your data. It's like, I've become a data-driven president. Also, they'd say I'm empathetic. And they'd be right. You saw me crying, so they know that I care, and I invest myself. I'm very generous of heart, and they would know that. And I think basically they'd say that I'm very visionary. They could point to examples of how I've said, come on, they've come along, and we've done well because of that. Now, you might not ask me this question, but the one thing that I take a lot of joy in is that we always use SESI and no Levitz.
Yeah.
I can't remember what SESI stands for. Something like, we don't.
Satisfaction
I think everybody knows that, yeah. So we use them every other year. And about 8 years ago, we asked the question, what is the most important thing the president should do to kind of like fix the college? And it was improve morale. That was 8 years ago. 2 years ago, that wasn't the most important thing anymore. It was, let's improve retention. And I'm going, yay, because that's what we're there for, So I really believe that that faculty and staff, they know the weaknesses of the president. There just have to be, and there always will be, but there just have to be more strengths that they can believe in and hold on to. So everybody has weakness.
You give yourself 100% of the time. That's the genuineness.
I do my best.
Yeah. One last question.
Okay.
Reflecting on your entire community college experience and looking back at that wealth of experience and the history and everything that you've devoted to the community colleges, is there anything that you would change or have done differently?
Yeah, I would definitely have used decision-making processes based on data earlier. I was so involved in making people try to feel good or improving the process of communication that I sometimes lost track of, but is it working? Like all the services we have for students. Now we know better. We use the student satisfaction surveys to tell us whether or not parking really even is a problem for students. Mm-hmm. So don't fix it if it isn't broken. I really think I was such a better president toward the end than I was in the beginning because of Achieving the Dream, teaching us scorecards. I was evaluated by a scorecard, how well our students did. I mean, that's how a president should be evaluated, on the learning success of students. And I asked to be evaluated that way. The other thing is I would have had more confidence. When I was young, there's a new study, there are two studies. The UCLA study that was a longitudinal one showed people from the time they were born until the time they died, what were the keys of success in those people? And they came up with 3 ingredients. And I use this when I'm talking to students. Intellectual curiosity, dependability, and confidence. And then a new study came out from Harvard that I just heard about, and I'm trying to get it, but they did the same thing on the East Coast. They studied people, they're still studying them, and they found out the most important ingredient to success and being a successful person would be having meaningful relationships. Meaningful relationships. Well, I think I did pretty well on all of those except one, and that's confidence. I have always lacked confidence. I mean, even this interview, I'm not confident about it when I do it but I think that I should have been a little more bold and had more confidence in myself. For example, when I first became a president at Eastern Gateway, and this is, it's hard for me to talk about it, but as a mother, I had 2 children and a foster son and and a husband. I would put work first because I was a dean and I was a president, and I felt that I had a responsibility to my job. And I was a primary breadwinner in our family, so I put that as a top priority in many ways. As a matter of fact, the most serious collision happened, and you can always usually make it work, like you do with your kids. Mm-hmm. But I had a very bad collision. My first year at Eastern Gateway, there were 2 internal candidates. I was an external candidate, and I got the job. One reason I got it was because one of them didn't have a PhD, but this caused problems. They wanted the job, they didn't get it because I got it. So I always kind of had to look over my shoulder, watch my back. I shouldn't. Anyway, it worked out all right. But graduation came, my first year there, and it was at 10 o'clock on the 14th of May, the very same time and date that my younger son, Luke, was graduating from Lindenwood University in St. Louis. And I had to make a choice. So I chose to be the president, to welcome the class and to congratulate the class and wear the robe, and at the same time my son is graduating. So it was a tough decision. And when you say, would you done it differently? Yes, I would have now. Because I did, you know, it was okay. I mean, I was a president for 16 years. I didn't have to worry, you know, but I didn't know that then. I thought that my first duty would be with the students who were graduating from the college, you know. So presidents and deans, we all make tough decisions. So that was probably one of the biggest collisions I had with family. But I would never, ever change my mind about working in a community college, because to me, it's a mission. And my family now, what Luke would say, because I asked my kids, they're grown now, they have children of their own. And I said, did it bother you when I was a dean and a president and I had to work such long hours and everything? They said, no, Mom, you forgot us a couple times. You know, I did in the rain once, Luke, you know. But Mom, we always knew, and I think this is the biggest wonderful thing. I won't cry about it, I'm happy about this one. They always said, Mom, you weren't there, but we always knew you were helping someone. Isn't that nice?
That is nice.
Does that make you feel good?
Yes.
And maybe your kids will say that too.
It makes you feel fulfilled that you're doing your mission.
Yeah, and your
what you're
kids,
supposed
and
to.
they said they were proud of me. They said,
Yeah.
Mom, we were really proud of you, you know. So, I don't know. And frankly, I mean, the money is good. I mean, you know, so you can buy nice shirts, you know, so my kids are happy.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
I hope
thank
I
you.
helped.
You're wonderful.
Well,
Thank
so are
you
you.
for being an inspiring leader
Thanks
that
for
you
asking
are.
me. I'm honored.
Thank you.